Your dog is staring at the wall again, ears forward, body perfectly still, attention locked on a spot somewhere between the baseboard and the ceiling. And then the barking starts. Sharp, certain, directed at absolutely nothing you can see. You've checked. You've walked over and stood in that exact spot. There is nothing there. Most owners land on one of two explanations. Either the dog is anxious, reacting to some internal noise in its own nervous system, or it's a quirk, just something this particular dog does. Both explanations have the same thing in common. They assume the dog is wrong. The research suggests otherwise. And one specific thing your dog can detect, something most owners would not believe until they saw the clinical data, we'll get to before this is done. Start with the most obvious explanation, because it turns out to be more substantial than most owners realize. You assume that if you cannot hear anything, there is nothing to hear. That assumption has a flaw built into it, which is that you are using your own auditory range as the reference. Dogs hear frequencies up to approximately 65,000 hertz. The upper limit of human hearing sits at roughly 20,000. That gap, 45,000 hertz of acoustic information that exists in your home, in your yard, in the walls around you, is entirely inaccessible to you and entirely available to your dog. Rodents moving inside wall cavities, insects in ceiling voids, bats roosting in an attic, certain appliances cycling at ultrasonic frequencies. All of these produce sound that registers with precision to your dog and produces nothing in you. Not a muffled version, not a faint version, nothing. That's not a dog barking at a wall. That's a dog responding to a specific auditory event behind it. The hearing difference also operates on the other end of the frequency range, and this is where the explanation moves outdoors. Dogs detect infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that fall below the floor of human hearing. Severe weather systems, geological activity, and large machinery at significant distance all produce infrasonic signatures. The literature on animal behavior preceding natural disasters is well established in ethological research, and domestic dogs appear consistently in it. Their paw pads contain mechanoreceptors capable of detecting subtle ground vibrations. This is documented in veterinary anatomy. What that means behaviorally is that a dog barking at an open yard or empty sky may be registering a pressure wave that will resolve minutes later into audible thunder or a tremor you will feel through the floor. The dog is not wrong. It is early. Think about what that means. The bark that seemed to come from nowhere arrives before the evidence you need to understand it. From where you stand, the sequence is bark, then nothing, then eventually, maybe, something. From where the dog stands, the sequence is signal, response, confirmation. But there is a third layer of perception that hearing and vibration do not touch, and it operates on a different order of magnitude entirely. The dog's olfactory system contains approximately 300 million scent receptors. Humans have roughly 6 million. The region of the brain dedicated to analyzing olfactory information is, proportionally, 40 times larger in a dog than in a human. These figures are well established in veterinary neuroscience, and what they describe is not a better version of the sense of smell you have. They describe a different relationship to chemical information altogether, one in which the world is continuously legible in a way that has no equivalent in human experience. Dogs can detect odors at concentrations as low as 1 part per trillion. The practical consequence of this is that your yard, your hallway, your living room, all of these spaces carry detailed chemical records of everything that has moved through them. An animal that passed through the yard hours ago left a scent trail that, to your dog, is as vivid as a visual presence. A stranger who stood at your front door and left. A wild animal that crossed the property at 3 in the morning. Your dog is not hallucinating a presence. It is reading a record. And this same olfactory system, the one that processes 300 million data points per breath, is what makes the finding we'll arrive at before the end of this video so difficult to dismiss. Because what it detects is not limited to the external world. There is a fourth dimension to this, though, that has nothing to do with what enters from outside. Dogs maintain detailed cognitive maps of their territory, who belongs in it, what the baseline looks like, and where boundaries have been crossed. The research of Dr. Alexandra Horowitz at the Dog Cognition Lab at Barnard College has documented the sophistication of the spatial cognition. Dogs use location marking scent to establish territorial boundaries and track which individuals have transited those boundaries and when. This is well established in canine ethology. What this means in practice is that a dog may bark at a specific corner of the yard, persistently, specifically, not randomly, because that corner registers as violated. The intruder is gone. The record of the intrusion is not. To the dog, the information is present tense. The location carries it. The bark is a response to a fact, not an error. That's not a dog confused about where to direct its alarm. That's a dog reading something written into the space itself, in a language its owner cannot access. Now add one more variable, because barking does not happen in isolation. Social species carry a bias toward alarm contagion. One animal's alarm signal triggers the same response in others who have not independently detected the original stimulus. This is documented across multiple species in ethological literature. The logic is evolutionary. In a group, a false positive costs almost nothing. A missed genuine threat can cost everything. The bias toward responding to another individual's alarm, even without personal confirmation, is adaptive. What this means for a dog in an urban environment is that the original stimulus may be 2 houses away. Your dog did not detect it directly. It detected another dog's alarm response, and its own nervous system treated that alarm as sufficient evidence to respond. The bark that seems to come from nowhere may be the third link in a chain that started with something real, somewhere else, that you will never trace. Now, here is the finding the research has documented, and the one that most owners find hardest to accept until they look at the numbers directly. The olfactory system that processes 300 million receptors does not only read the external environment. It reads physiological states in the people the dog lives with, including states those people have not yet identified in themselves. The clinical field of medical detection is not theoretical. Dogs have been trained to identify specific volatile organic compounds produced by the human body during oncoming seizures, hypoglycemic episodes, and certain cancers. The Medical Detection Dogs Charity in the United Kingdom, working in collaboration with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, produced peer-reviewed findings on this capability. Researchers at the University of Helsinki have examined whether this sensitivity extends to untrained dogs detecting cancer-associated odor compounds. Dogs with no specialized training, responding to biological information their owners were unaware of. The mechanism is the same one that explains every other behavior in this video. A dog does not need to be taught to detect a physiological change in someone it lives with. It needs only to detect it. And detection at this level of olfactory resolution is not a trained skill. It is the baseline. A dog that suddenly begins barking at or near its owner, not at the yard, not at the wall, at the person, may be responding to a chemical signal the owner cannot perceive and has not yet named. This is not folklore. It is documented molecular biology, applied to the animal that has been living in your home all along. Return to the image you started with, the dog at the wall, the bark that seemed to come from nothing. What the research describes, across hearing and infrasound and olfaction and spatial cognition and social alarm and biological detection, is an animal navigating a version of the world that runs in parallel to the one you inhabit. It is more detailed than yours in every sensory dimension. It is not disordered. It is not misfiring. It is doing precisely what its nervous system was built to do: perceiving, evaluating, and reporting. Every bark at apparent nothing is a dispatch from that parallel world. The dog was never confused. You were just missing the frequency. If you want to understand what your dog is reading in your face when something is wrong, the next video goes into the science of that, and what it reveals about this bond is harder to look away from than you'd expect.